Well, if you were with us last Sunday, I mentioned how I had been having a rich conversation with our church member, Gordon Stannis, who's here today, about pruning. Gordon is a gardener, and we were talking about how pruning is such a great metaphor for the season of Lent. Gordon explained to me that when a gardener prunes a plant, they're literally cutting off a part of a living plant. But they're not doing it to harm the plant. They're doing it for the health of the plant, to help the plant grow stronger so that the plant can experience new growth and new life. Such a rich and beautiful metaphor, so thank you, Gordon, for that. I explained to Gordon that I grew up in New York City. I'm a city kid, so I don't know a lot about plants. Our backyard, where I grew up, was literally a slab of concrete. Like when my mother said kids go out and play, that's where we played, on the concrete. So I really wasn't around nature until Greg and I moved here to Saugatuck. Now, we moved here in the winter. And that very first spring, around this time of year, I had to go to New York. My mother was very ill, and I needed to take care of her. And when I came back that first spring, I noticed there were all these beautiful tulips in front of our house. And I thanked Greg. I said, Greg, thank you for planting the tulips while I was gone. And he said, I didn't plant those. The previous owners did. And I said, well, I'll have to thank them for doing that while I was away. That was so nice of them. And Greg was like, no, you fool. The tulips were in the ground all winter. And then I went to our backyard. We had a pond back there. Of course, it was frozen when I left. Now it was unfrozen. When I looked in the pond, I saw there were fish. And again, I thanked Greg. Thank you so much for putting fish in the pond while I was away. And of course, he explained that they had been there all winter. He didn't put them there. And I've got to tell you, as strange as it may sound for those of you who grew up around nature, for me, that was such a spiritual awakening. Honestly, that really shook me to my core. I came to think, wow, these plants are sustained in the ground through the cold and the snow, the ice and the darkness. The fish are still alive. How is that possible? And then I came to understand that the same power that sustains those tulips in the ground, that sustains the fish through the winter, is the same power that sustains me through the winter and darkness of my life. The times in my life where I have felt abandoned and hurt, where I have felt barren and lifeless and hopeless, there was a power and a presence that sustained me. The power of the Christ. When I look out at the trees in the winter, of course they appear barren, they appear dead. There's no leaves on them. But of course we know they're not dead. They're just in process. I wish we understood that during those times in our lives where we feel lifeless. It's just part of the process. Think of a caterpillar. It needs to go into the cocoon. It needs to die to being a caterpillar in order for it to become a butterfly. And you can't rush it. It's a process. And that is why the church purposely placed Lent during this time of year. Lent is always that time between winter and the beginning of spring. It's a 40-day process to remind us of resurrection and new life. Now, some of you may be familiar with the pastor whose name is Rob Bell. Rob got his start right here in West Michigan. He was the pastor of Mars Hill in Granville, and then went on to become a best-selling author and writer, appeared on Oprah. Rob is a wonderful pastor and writer. And in one of his most recent books, he said this: Look at the seasons. In the winter, everything dies. And then in the spring, it comes back to life. It literally springs forth. Or take your cells. You have several billion cells in your body right now, and they're constantly dying while your body is producing new ones to replace them. Around 300 million cells in your body die and are replaced every minute. Death is the engine of life. All around us, all the time, this death and life rhythm is built into the fabric of all of creation. I love that. Death is the engine of life. It's built into the fabric of all of creation. And that's what today's gospel reading is all about for the fifth Sunday in Lent, the raising of Lazarus. Now, this is Jesus' very last miracle before he himself will be crucified and put to death. And so this foreshadows his own death. Now, if you've been with us through the season of Lent, you know we're reading from the Gospel of John, and we've been explaining how that gospel is highly symbolic. Now, John's gospel was the very last of the gospels to be written, decades after Jesus lived. It's the only gospel in which we hear about the raising of Lazarus. Now, you would think if Jesus did something so extraordinary of raising someone from the dead, that the earlier gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, would have written about it in their gospels. So some theologians have speculated that John's gospel is not really meant to be understood as a literal history, but as symbolic stories, spiritual stories. Now, I really don't know whether it actually happened or not, but to me it doesn't really matter. Because regardless of how you understand this story, it speaks to a great spiritual truth. And what is that truth? Well, let's look at the symbolism of the story together. Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they live in a town called Bethany. It's a symbolic place. The word Bethany means house of sorrows. My friends, in our lifetime, we're going to be dwelling in Bethany. We're going to be living in the house of sorrows. We can't escape the human experience without it. Some of you are dwelling in Bethany right now. Martha and Mary are in sorrow. Their brother has died. He's ill at this point. They summon Jesus to come and be with him. And does Jesus drop everything and go running to be with his friend? No. He stays where he was for 2 more days. He's in no rush because he understands the process. Now, when he gets there, of course, Martha and Mary are angry. Lazarus has died in that time. And they say to Jesus, if only you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. How many of us do that when we're in the house of sorrow? How many of us call out to God for help? We don't get an answer right away. And we're like, where are you? And we see that Jesus weeps. God feels compassion for us during those times of darkness. God hears our prayers. But maybe God also cries and weeps because we haven't quite yet learned to trust in the process. Jesus is saying, I'm with you. I'm here. And what does he do? He says, remove the stone. So that's my question for you today on the fifth Sunday in Lent. What's your stone? What is blocking right now you from the light, from experiencing life to the full? Is it anger? Is it resentment? Is it lack, limitation? What is the block? You have to identify it. You have to call it out before you can remove it. And then after Jesus calls it out, it says he lifted up his eyes, which means he went to a place of higher consciousness. Once we identify our block, we go to a place of higher consciousness and prayer and meditation. And in that higher place, what do? We do what Jesus said. Come out, Lazarus. We call forth the light that is within us. The name Lazarus is also symbolic. It means the one whom God has helped. You, my friends, you're Lazarus, the one whom God has helped. If you look back on the times in your life where you were living in darkness, the power and presence of God was with you, even if you weren't aware of it. And that's why Jesus says here, I am the resurrection and the life. He's not speaking personally as Jesus of Nazareth. The I isn't a personal pronoun. He's speaking from his Christ nature. That I am, that great I am, that's the resurrection and the life. That power and presence of the Christ. That's the power that keeps the tulip bulbs alive in the winter. That's the power that keeps the fish breathing in the winter, in the ice. It's the power that is with the caterpillar in the cocoon as it transforms into the butterfly. And it is the power and presence that is with you and within you when you are going through the winters, the darkness of your life. And so, my friends, as we journey towards Holy Week, may you find time each and every day to lift up your eyes, to rise up, to go to a place of higher consciousness where you can call out, summon forth your light. For the power, the presence, the light and life of God is with you and within you. Summon it forth and be set free. Namaste.
Hello, everybody. This is Sal Sapienza, and I'm so excited to share with all of you that I've written a brand new book. The book is called Childish Thinking: How the Church Keeps Us Stuck in Sunday School. Now, the title Childish Thinking comes from Christian scripture, where we hear that if we wish to grow in spiritual understanding, then we must let go of childish ways of thinking. And yet so many Christians today, even after years of Bible study and Sunday services, still have a very elementary understanding of their faith. They still understand God as some old man with a long gray beard. They think heaven is a place up in the clouds with pearly gates, that the devil is some red guy with horns and a pitchfork, and that hell is a fiery place below the earth. Those are things that we tell children. None of those descriptions appear anywhere in the Bible. And so in Childish Thinking, I try to dispel many of those misnomers, and I explore topics such as God, Jesus, heaven, hell, sin, prayer, and resurrection from the higher perspectives of ancient Christian mystics and contemporary progressive theologians. After each chapter, there are prayers for quiet contemplation and questions for personal reflection and journal writing. Come learn how you can let go of old ways of thinking and begin to see things with new eyes. Come and learn how you can finally graduate from Sunday school. The book is available now on Amazon, and you can read the entire introduction at childishthinking.faith.